on to the next discussion, do want to touch on this issue, how did housing specifically beyond some of what we just talked about played out in this election. I know that the conference and folks that they spoke to are interested in, was it pivotal? Maybe David, you and Dr. Richardson can think about that. There was an ad or something that you saw when you were out in the field. But then let's go to you for a response.
So I just met Bill. I already like him because he's painfully honest. Painfully honest. But you know, and if I miss something, come back to me. But you know, I'm going to jump to my thesis on what happened on election day and kind of work backwards. At the end of the day, this was about jobs. This was about the economy. This was about nobody working in the state of Ohio, nobody working in the state of Pennsylvania. These are all places I'm extremely familiar with. And I think to answer Jackie's point about the housing piece and to cut to that, because I think what Bill said, all of it are statistically correct, and I could spend another half hour going through this, that, and this, that. But there was a New York Times exit poll that came out after the elections. If you haven't seen it, Google it, pull it up. I'm not a knowledge person, I'm not a pollster, I'm not a policy person. But here's what it said. Every issue on the planet got 10%, 12%. Afghanistan, healthcare, you name it. A Republican and Democrat. They were virtually identical. Then there was the virtual identical biggest percentage of the number one issue. And that was, keep in mind, the other issues were right around 10 or 12%. Was 60 to 63% of Republicans and Democrats and independents felt that the economy and jobs was the number one. Now, in my humble opinion, because there's no statistical data to prove, well, what happened in places where the housing crisis was a huge problem and where it didn't, is that you guys were, essentially the housing folks, victims of the financial crisis. And that played out in election after election. The irony of it all is that you had states like California, where the side I'm on, my brother from the Go Pack, not on, but you had a Senate race and a governor's race, where you had Republican candidates who were deeply rooted in corporate America and less more so Wall Street. We associated them, we spent millions and millions of dollars, the Labor did, the Democratic Party did, and pounded them on really one issue, being connected to the financial crisis. And we won. Go to Ohio, go to Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Kasich in Ohio, all related directly to financial institutions like Lehman Brothers and so on, where we've had huge job loss. And people in those states understood what the loss of jobs was related to. I mean, Wall Street still voted for it, overwhelmingly. And it goes to Bill's point about white independence, because I do think they were pissed off. They were upset.
Technical political term.
Exactly. And, you know, so what you saw was really, there was a strategy that was taken on by both the left and the right, and anybody tells you otherwise is full of it. This wasn't a national campaign. This was localized, very much so, but when you broke down the local issues, it went back to jobs in the economy. And that was the reality. And what, you know, I said, and part I'll disagree with Bill on, is, you know, take healthcare, take the auto bailout, take all those things. If Ohio creates 200,000 jobs, that voter is not going into the booth pissed off about healthcare, about the auto bailout, or maybe they are, but they got a job. And when you walk in a place like Strongesville, Ohio, where I actually walked because I set an example as a young staffer within the AFL-CIO and to the president, that we practice what we preach. When you walk in a place like Strongsville, Ohio, which is the epitome of blue-collar middle America, the suburb of Cleveland, auto industry, steel industry, service sector, and you go and knock on a door and it says evicted, there's an evicted. This is John Mellencamp, Bruce Springsteen, middle America, white America, for that matter. When you see evicted, you know that that person either A, is not voting, off, they really don't care. Or B, they're not voting for the person that's in charge. This is not politics is not rocket science. You know, there is no mandate for the Republican Party. There is no mandate for the Democratic Party. There's a mandate by the American people. Fix this. We have a crisis in this country around the economy, and unfortunately, the housing crisis is central to that crisis. You know, and I would go back to another example, the state of Georgia. You know, Atlanta, huge housing crisis. They didn't vote for a Democrat because, hey, Democrats say that corporate America and Wall Street is the reason why things are the way they are. They didn't. They voted for the Republicans. That's what they wanted to vote for. They thought that was the solution. Yet there was a huge housing crisis there. Right? So I think it's really a case-by-case situation. But I think, you know, leading up to Election Day, and Bill and I were talking earlier, unemployment, when you're talking 15% unemployment in the state of Michigan, talking 12% unemployment in the state of Ohio, I don't care who's in charge. American voters are not going to vote for who's in charge if unemployment's that high. And Washington, whether they got it, all of us, or they didn't get it, it really wasn't up to us. It was up to the fact that the American voters said, you know what, the housing crisis is a problem, Wall Street's a problem, it's not being fixed, I'm going to vote for somebody else. That's what, or I'm not going to vote. So that really what, you know, I look at what Bill laid out, and, you know, going forward, both parties, and even, you know, you saw the Tea Party, you saw, you know, Glenn Beck's rally, you saw Stephen Colbert and, you know, John Stewart, which was the biggest rally out of all of them. You know, Glenn Beck had the second biggest rally, One Nation had the third biggest rally, you know, whatever the press says as far as size. People are pissed, and they want solutions to the economic crisis. They want to know why they're being evicted, or why they were told, I can have a second mortgage, or what have you. They're going to blame somebody. That's just the reality of what's happening in America. But I do think that as we go forward, and I'm looking at my notes here, if either party fails at addressing the housing crisis, which is a spoke of the economic crisis, the jobs crisis, they will not be in office in 2012. That is abundantly clear. You don't have to listen to Brother Luntz on the right as a pollster, and you don't have to listen to Stan Greenberg on the left. This crisis is not addressed, housing being one of the central focuses of the economic jobs crisis in America. It'll flip again, and they'll blame John Boehner, or they'll blame Barack Obama, or they'll blame Harry Reid. That's the reality of the political. And I'm assuming you might decide to say, well, yeah, I read that in the newspaper. That's the truth. And so as you go forward, some of the solutions that, and I'll stop, that people are looking at for folks like yourselves in the audience is bring solutions to the table for people to address these housing crises. American people have lost their faith in, and I believe this fundamentally, whether it's a union worker, or a non-union worker, or a white independent, or an African American, in capitalists' ability to work for them, for the American dream to actually happen. They want to own a house. I don't think that's that poll number. If you ask American people, do you want to own a house? That number is probably the same number it's always been. And if it's different, they're lying, because that's the American dream is all about. So there's an opportunity where there's obviously a dark hour in the American economy. But that's really what it comes down to. So.
That's